chasing all my freedoms down Liberty Avenue. And every time I hear a phrase my mother used to say to me, everything happens for a reason, I get the feeling I need a little taste of home, 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 just a little taste of home. I need a little taste of home, home, home. I need a little taste of home. Nothing like kitchen conversation, steam coming up off the stove, photographs down the staircase showing our stories unfold. And every time I hear a song my father used to sing to me, sweet words of an Irish lullaby, I get the feeling I need a little taste of home, home, home. I need a little taste of home. Home, 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 just a little taste of home. I need a little taste of home, 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 no matter where I go. A little taste of home, home, home. I need a little taste of home. Just bought my ticket, I pick up the phone. I'm calling to tell you that I'm coming home. Home, 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 I'm coming home. I need a little taste of home, 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 I'm coming home.
When the going gets weird, Alexander Strange gets going. He's America's only full-time weird news reporter. You can follow his adventures in a series of mysteries by award-winning journalist and author J.C. Bruce. Kirkus Reviews calls the Strange Files series suspenseful page-turners, punctuated with dashes of the surreal. The online book club says they're full of twists and turns, simultaneously mystery and comedy. Available in hardcover, paperback, and ebooks. Order your copies online at Amazon and Barnes & Noble right now. Just search for J.C. Bruce and look for The Strange Files, Florida Man, Get Strange, Strange Currents, and Mr. Manners. See why the critics are raving about this series. Order your copies right now. Beaming to you like a whirlwind. In syndication and on all the apps worldwide. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network.
And it is, boy, is it Friday already?
Thursday.
Is it Thursday? Well, see, I'm losing my days already. Well, it's Thursday, and it is the 12th of January. At least I didn't say February. Now, the Pentagon came out with a report that they promised. And if you go to I have breaking news on our group page on Facebook. And the article I put up says it all about what the Pentagon report was. Did you see the report I put up there on our group page?
I did see some of that. Yes, I did. What a report that was.
Well, it's pretty much what the Pentagon gave out. They basically said, well, there's some things we just don't know what it is, but most of it we know what it is. And that was the end of the report.
So now we can go to bed happy tonight knowing we've got complete disclosure.
Oh, we have. Like I said, go to our Facebook page for Night Dreams Talk Radio. I got a great picture. It tells it all. You know, there's a couple other shows. One in Canada is going to have a big tonight. Breaking news about the Pentagon report. Well, if they come out with anything more than that, guess what? Mm-hmm. They're smoking crack.
Okay. Well, that would be breaking news.
Yeah, that would be. Now, I'm not telling you what lady's crack it was, but I can tell you it's going to be crack. Well, I was going to finish a story last night. There's a lady in the UK is so freaking cheap. Uh-oh. She recycles toilet paper.
Oh, my goodness. Please do tell. Can you give us
she figured out a way to put it in the washing machine in some type of container. She has a long, recipe how to recycle and rewash your toilet paper and how to roll it back up to resemble toilet paper without falling apart. But it's a special type of toilet paper you have to use. And it's almost like that toilet paper when you go out and buy a new pair of shoes, or like it used to, wrapped in this paper. Well, that's the type of toilet paper you would have to use. But can you imagine going to this lady's house if she was single and say, can I use your bathroom for a minute? I got a runny nose. Mm-hmm. And you reach in and pull out toilet paper and it smells like shit.
Oh my goodness. What that would be a one and done date there, I would say, pretty much. But here's the thing, whoever, doesn't likes the toilet paper, I guess they would be I
don't know. There's people have a fetish of eating toilet paper, that, and eating lint. And can you imagine? I'm going to the store today. What are you getting, honey? Well, I ran out of toilet paper last night while watching my favorite TV show. You mean you had diarrhea? No, I eat it. Haven't you ever wondered how all these 30 rolls of toilet paper disappear each week? I eat them. I just take them in little wads and I chew them and eat them.
When you said eat, I thought you was going to say something else.
You probably did, huh? Well, guess what? Because of all the rainstorms and the weather, could you imagine you're going to bury a body in a casket?
Oh, no.
And I'm not going to mention the cemetery, but so far they had 3 or 4 incidents where the graveyard workers are bringing the body to put into the hole. By the way, some of the holes are even flooded. And they slip in the mud and they drop the body out of the casket. And could you imagine the people being freaked out here, They're holding their umbrellas. They're there for the funeral, and here's a loved one just rolling down on the grass and mud.
Oh, that would be horrible. It reminds me of that Vincent Price movie I watched where they was undertakers. They get selling these nice, expensive caskets. They take them out there once it's over. They just empty them into the hole and bury them and resell the casket over.
Oh, just like that lady who just got sentenced for 20 years.
Yeah.
She ran a funeral home, right? And she was selling, as many organs and body tissue as she can from the loved ones. And and very seldom was she burying people.
Right. And then there was that other news story a few years ago where the guy was, had all them inside the wall. He was selling them and supposed to cremate them, all this. And
it's strange people. Well, you know what it is? It's National Curry Chicken Day.
Oh, boy.
You know what I think about that one? I hate curry chicken. Well, it's also Kiss a Ginger Day. Do you want to go out and kiss a ginger?
No, not today.
Well, how about tomorrow then?
Nope, I'll take a rain check.
Okay, well, in the United States, we're talking always about dogmen and Bigfoot.
Yes.
Well, in England, they have now filmed a fox, two-legged, walking.
Interesting.
So now we got dogmen and Bigfoot, and we got two-legged fox.
Foxman. We got Foxman.
Yeah,
now.
they got foxmen.
What's next? Catwalkers?
I have no idea. It's in the news. By the way, Elvis Presley's daughter passed away. She was in her early 50s today of a heart attack. Well, there is a video circulating all over the internet today of a flying saucer coming out of an erupting volcano in Mexico. How do they know it's a flying saucer? Why couldn't it be a big boulder? It was kicked out of the the volcano.
Yeah, listen, that volcano, I forget what its name of it is, but they've had videos of this over the years, and a couple of them been debunked. What it was an airplane, and the way that it was angled when they record it, it kind of looks like a UFO, but it's really just an airplane.
Yeah. Well, police in the UK were very embarrassed.
Uh-oh.
They got a phone call. The lady in distress in a storefront window slept over a desk anyway, a table. And they thought maybe something was bad, so they broke the windows to get her out and rescue her and found out it was a mannequin.
Oh, boy. Hey, listen, mannequins can be scary. Remember that Koshak?
I remember that. Well, for Christmas, I didn't know this, JC. Spam is made in Christmas time, holiday season, in different flavors. Do you know they have Spurgy Fergie pudding spam?
I did not know that. I thought he was going to tell me that pumpkin.
Wild cherry.
Oh,
I know a couple girls that could fit in that. Orange.
Oof.
Chocolate mousse spam. A limited edition. I'm dead serious. Dead serious.
Pumpkin spice spam.
I don't know about that. I don't even like spam like the way it is, but let alone, oh God, I'm going to throw up. All across the world, people are getting tired of their yachts or rowboats or motorboats. And you know what they're doing? They're abandoning them. And it's costing the harbors a lot of money, the cities and counties all over the world, a lot of money to get rid of these derelict boats.
That is bizarre because, listen, they're scrapping people. A lot of them scrap, but...
yeah, but a lot of them aren't worth scrapping. The old wood or old fiberglass, and, they're derelict, or old even ships, that... the cost is, most of them, they would have to take them out and sink them and whatever they have to do. But then they have to decontaminate them. They have to remove the oil out of them, all this stuff. Very expensive. So the owners are just abandoning them and walking away from them.
Yeah, because they can't afford the upkeep, I guess, or the storage.
Well, guess what? They're worried about bird flu outbreaks in the United States, and it could spill over to humans.
Yeah, doesn't that start with the chickens?
Well, I guess so.
I think so.
Yeah, well, that's because they're fooling around with the DNA like last night, and they're trying to get dinosaur legs on a chicken.
Or a T-Rex head on a chicken.
I think KFC had something to do with that one.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you rattled their cage before, so yeah.
Yeah, well, or something. Well, also in the news, a professor insists we actually don't live in a matrix. Everything that happens is real. If you cut your finger off on a bandsaw, it's not a figment of your imagination. It's not a computer glitch. You actually cut your frickin' finger off. Duh, I'm not lying about that one either. There it is, okay? We don't live in an artificial computer chip.
Oh, here, I thought we was written in a script by some alien somewhere in a preschool.
Probably. Okay, I won't even go that way. Mobile Exxon, you know who they are. Exxon Mobil.
Yes.
Back in the 70s, the scientists for the company said, guess what? We're going to go through earth changes, climate changes. And the government didn't even take them serious. Now, guess what's going on? Global warming. And you know what? Even half the scientists, it's not happening. But look what's going on in California. Mass flooding. Okay, that's the whole point. It doesn't just get hot and stay hot. The weather gets erratic. It does everything. Just like my second wife would do everything.
Oh, this is erratic. Even your first wife was a little
Oh,
erratic.
I'm sorry. That was erotic, wasn't it? I get those two words mixed up.
You get your wires crossed, or E's or letters, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to say, good evening on chat to Christopher George. Hi, Kim. Stay away from those chocolate milkshakes. Hi, Barb. How are you doing? And, we have John Power and Light and some other people out there on chat. Well, I hope you guys are all staying out of trouble because I'm getting into trouble. By the way, we play the strange news on the show. And it must be a big hit because my two big competitions, there's one that nobody can be a competition to. That's Coast to Coast. But there's two other shows out there. All of a sudden here, started doing the strange news. Isn't that kind of weird? And they even play the same frickin' intro that I do on my news.
Yeah. At least
everybody's making money but me.
Yeah, and we're trailblazing. There you go.
Yeah. While the House votes to block Biden from selling oil reserves, whatever little bit we have, to China.
Oh, my goodness. That's a double indemnity if I ever heard of one.
Well, Congress is trying to do away with the IRS and just put a tax on, and that would even be for the wealthy, the poor, whatever. You go to the store, it kind of like was the war tax. You're not old enough to probably even remember that. When I was a kid, you'd go buy something and there was a tax. I think it was like 5 cents, 6 cents, whatever it is on $1. And you go buy something, and that was a war tax left over from World War II all the way up to the early 60s. And it would make more logical sense to put taxes on products, right? And services, and get rid of the IRS, get rid of the audits, get rid of the tax cheats, get rid of the wealthy people that figure out how to hide their money and manipulate it. If they go out and buy a yacht, they're going to pay the tax on it. If they're going to buy a new mansion, they're going to pay the taxes on it. They buy a new BMW, they're going to pay the taxes on it. Well, Biden says if that comes up on his desk, if for some reason that the Senate agrees with it, he's going to veto it.
We wouldn't have to pay the IRS workers, too. The 80,000 new ones supposed to be hiring, too.
Yeah, and the IRS goes after the poor people. Poor people that make under like $20,000 a year because they know they don't have the money to defend themselves and they'll cough up the money one way or the other. Well, Walmart egg prices have reached $27 for 5 dozen eggs.
Yeah, that's $5 and something a dozen. That's outrageous. So that's some expensive chicken's almost 50 cents an egg.
Up in the mountains, and it doesn't say where, but they have found old ancient civilizations up thousands of feet that they didn't even know that civilization even existed. And they're curious how they could make these structures on top of these thousands of feet up on these plateaus, on these mountaintops, and build all this stuff and get it up there to do it.
It's amazing. I've seen some of that stuff in Central and South America on these mountains. They're up in the clouds. You can't even see them.
Yeah.
They're 10,000 feet in the air. I don't know if it's Michu or one of them, but yeah, they're way up there.
Yeah, but how could they do it? How could they get up there? They didn't have helicopters. I know how they did it. ETs.
Yes, and then some of the stones are 20, 30, 40 tons and are cut precisely, Gary.
All I know is again, technology. They finally figured out, here it was in the news just a couple days ago. I'm surprised you didn't notice it. They finally figured out how the Romans made that cement that could last for thousands of years, even in the water. And, places where they had bulkheads and all that stuff, and where it didn't break down from the seawater.
Yeah, now there's something they can put a patent on. If somebody
Well, they figured it out. You know what? They take lime, and how we do it is we take a fine powder lime and we mix it. What the Romans did is they put it in chunks and broke it up into and created their concrete. Now, isn't that strange? It took about 100 years for them to figure out how they did it.
I think it took longer than that, but yeah, listen, that's the.
Well, I don't think 100 years ago they were sitting back. I wonder how the Romans made cement, James.
Well, they've been making it for 2,000 years.
That's not what I'm saying. Scientists have been trying to figure out why their cement has lasted for thousands of years. When we make cement, it gets stronger as it gets older, but then after about 100 years, it starts breaking down.
Oh, it cracks. I've seen cement crack months after it's been laid.
Well, that's because they did something. They laid it wrong.
Yeah.
Like you did with your first marriage. You laid it wrong. But, seriously, you have to think about, that they figured out how they can make it super strong where it doesn't break down in age. So I don't know. They first thought it was ash and all that stuff in it. And it turned out to be that they took bigger hunks of lime and crushed it in versus powder.
Yeah, it was definitely in the combination of the ingredients. They were close, but now I guess they've got it.
Oh, yeah. Well, we got a great show tonight. We got Mark Leslie on, and he's going to be telling us some scary things, stories and stuff where you might want to bring a friend next to you or get your wife out of the bedroom and have her next to you on the couch. Put a log in that fireplace, make a martini or something, and put those feet up and get ready to be scared. We'll be back here just in a little bit. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. I'm your host. The guy in the back who's trying to be some type of sports guy is JC. We will be back, so stay tuned.
The strange news in brief. I'm Guy Ticker. Back in 1992, two friends had been traveling in South Lancashire, Scotland, when they encountered something terrifying. Colin distinctly remembered feeling a searing pain in one of his eyes, while Gary recalled a buzzing black lens that was being used to examine his body. He also said that the aliens had communicated with them. I'm Guy Ticker. The Strange News is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Do you have a strange story? Contact us at nightdreamstalkradio.com. coming to you live and covering all time zones like a glove. Here's Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio.
And we are back. Well, JC, who's our guest tonight, and what can you tell the listeners about him?
Well, our guest tonight is Mark Leslie. Now, Mark has long been afraid of the dark and fascinated with the paranormal and the unexplained, which has translated into Mark writing a half dozen books exploring ghosts and other paranormal phenomena.
Well, Mark, you are a guy right after me. I'll tell you what, I'm terrified of the dark.
We can be terrified together then, can't we?
Oh, yeah. My wife gets so mad at me because, I kind of, stay up late. I play around with my cell phone. I'm on my cell phone. I fall asleep. The phone drops on the floor. I have to tell my wife, hey, would you come and get it? Because I won't put my hand underneath the bed in the dark.
No, of course. Of course not. My partner as well. I remember one time we were camping and I was seeing shadows and hearing things outside the tent. And she's the brave one who actually had to go check out to make sure there were no monsters coming to get us.
Well, you never know out nowadays. I mean, look at all the people have vanished, out in the forest. There's a lot of people just zapped. They're gone.
Exactly. And tomorrow is Friday the 13th. So, I mean, that's an even scarier day to be in the forest, right?
Well, maybe I shouldn't do my show tomorrow if it's Friday the 13th. What do you think about that one, JC?
I think you'll be here. You can do it. Just bring your blankie. You get scared, pull it over your eyes, and you'll be good.
Oh, you have to tell people about that.
Well, you told them. I'm just repeating the fact.
I only do that occasionally.
Okay.
When I get scared, I put the blanket over my head. I figure something's going to grab and kill me if I don't want to see it. Of course, my wife gets offended. She says, you do that because you don't want to look at me without my makeup. And I said, I don't want to even look at you when you have your makeup on.
Well, there you go.
Well, Mark, I mean, what got you into, the paranormal and scary stuff?
Well, I always was fascinated and scared of the dark. There was always this question of what was there, right? And that was the thing that scared me, is the unknown and all of those elements. And I was in my early 20s living in Ottawa, Ontario, and I'd gone on a ghost walk, one of those historic ghost walks of downtown. And Ottawa is Canada's capital city, so there's a lot of history to be learned there. And I was fascinated with the combination of ghost stories, which I always loved, around campfires and stuff like that. And then they combined them with history. And for the first time in my life, I found history very fascinating, because you can't tell a good ghost story without getting into history. And it kind of stemmed from there. I'd always written horror stories, short stories, fiction, Twilight Zone kind of tales. So, since I was about 15 years old, when I actually started seriously writing and sending my stories away to get rejected by a publisher, all of those things. So then it wasn't until 2012 that I wrote my first book of true ghost stories for Hamilton, Ontario, the city I'd moved to and was learning about. And the way I learned about the city, the best way to learn about the city, of course, is go on a haunted ghost walk.
Now, when you wrote a book about that city, did they like you after the book came out?
The city? Yeah.
Well, sometimes you write a book about, hey, maybe people won't come and visit now because they're scared to walk the streets at night.
No, I think it was interesting because it was the first literary award I'd ever been nominated for. I didn't win, but it was ironic that it was a book of ghost stories that got me the nomination and sort of celebrated in many ways. And I think what's fascinating is a lot of people are interested in ghost stories and spooky tales and things they can't explain. And when I pitched this book to the publisher, I'm a Venn diagram kind of thinker. And so I kind of, visualize this Venn diagram that this is a book that it's going to appeal to people who love a good ghost story. Okay, that's one group. It's also going to appeal to people who enjoy historic tales, particularly of Canada and, formation, etc. And the third group of people are people who are very passionate about and proud of their city, and they just want anything that has to do with the city. And there had been no book like that on the market. And lo and behold, that's exactly where it, it fit in very nicely. And I called the book my love letter to the city of Hamilton, and I wrote that in the introduction because I had moved there and was learning about the city, and the more I learned about the ghosts and the history of the city, the more I loved the city, and it became my own home. And so, no, I don't recall. I mean, there was one of the locations, Dundurn Castle. They did not want. I wanted to do the book launch there because it's one of the more famous haunted locations, actually associated and connected to the royal family in England as well. But they did not want to have anything to do with ghosts, so they very, very politely declined my request to try and set up some sort of event.
Now, interesting. I want to take you back in time. When you were a child, were you infatuated with the Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, and shows like that?
Oh my God, yeah. I had Twilight Zone was a little bit before my days. I was born in '69, so I got to see some of them in rerun. But the Outer Limits was live, and Amazing Stories. Do you remember that Spielberg TV show?
Oh yeah.
Very similar. I love those shows. Those are and that's the kind of fiction I wrote, was that weird, inexplainable sort of thing. No, I just love those things. I love going back and watching the old classic episodes, and then they brought back the Outer Limits again a couple times, a few different series. So
they also
love those things.
They also had it on a radio too, the series, drama. And, they took like the old classic, Rod Sterling, what he wrote, and, put it into radio format. And I tell you, I still listen when I go to bed at night. That's one of the things I get freaked out on. I listen to the old Twilight Zone episodes.
Oh, I'm gonna have to check that out in radio format just to see.
It's all over the internet. Go to YouTube. Go to YouTube.
Sorry?
All you have to do is go on YouTube, and there it is. You just type in, Twilight Zone.
I will check it out. Thank you.
What was your favorite episode that you can remember of the Twilight Zone?
I mean, A Terror at 30,000 Feet is one of the classics that they've redone again. I think William Shatner was the actor in that one.
Oh yeah.
Did you remember that one?
Oh yeah, and he was probably the best one when they redid it. Both, with the newer Twilight Zone when they redid it, and then they also did it on the audio. Right. Nobody could have just the expressions that William Shatner put on. I tell you how they did it too. They actually said, "Hey, we're not going to pay you halfway through it," and no, that's not true. But I tell you, he was freaked out. Could you imagine you're sitting on a plane, right, and you're seeing this monster tearing the cowling apart of a motor and all this stuff? And I mean, but what was interesting at the end of that show, right, at the very end, the mechanics, go out there and look at the plane after it landed, and something was tearing that cowling apart on that motor. So what he was actually seeing was real. Everybody thought he was crazy.
Yeah, and I think, that's the true horror there, is that you're the only one who's aware something's happening and nobody's listening. Just brilliantly executed. One of the classics. The other one, there was the one about the guy who loved to read, and he just had no time to read, and he was waiting for time to read. And then the world ends, and he's at this library, and he's so happy because he's there with all these books, and he has these big Coke bottle kind of glasses, because he can't read without them, and then they fall and shatter. And so it's this really dark moment where finally he has enough time to read all the books he's wanted to read, but his glasses broke. Yeah,
and he had them all stacked up. This is this week, next week, the week after, next month, the month after that, next year, that year, that year. He was so ecstatic, and then he breaks his, glasses. I mean, it's just like, the pits of being maybe the only human left on Earth and the only excitement you would have left. He wasn't even thinking about food, water. No, how is he going to survive? It was books, to read books.
Yeah.
JC told me the same thing. If it happened, he would go to the adult store and get all these magazines. And he's a heck with people.
I do not recall.
Oh, I lied. Okay, I'm sorry.
Allegedly.
And
just going to get them for the articles.
Yeah, and a friend of mine who's no longer, Robert Culp, the actor, he did I think it was Twilight Zone, maybe it was The Outer Limits, and about these little monster bugs and stuff like that. Again, when you look back at those old shows, I mean, they didn't have all this graphics that they have nowadays. And, you look back at it now and young people laugh at it because, but when you're young and you see that stuff when it actually was being, broadcast, it was scary.
Oh, yeah. It was really something. And that harkens back to that value of story. And not relying on the high resolution graphics and the CGI, but relying on the actors, relying on the dialogue, relying on the angles of the camera, setting the mood, the music, all of those elements that come into it. And it brings me back to, one of my passions when I was a child was sitting around a campfire and listening to a really good storyteller have you shaking, sitting on the edge of your seat or the edge of your log or whatever it was you were sitting on. And just hanging on every word and terrified. But you can't stop listening.
No, I remember in camp, we used to do that. When I was a kid, they would farm me off to, for a month or two there in the summertime at the camp. And we would sit there and tell all these, scary stories, and then you'd have, you'd sit there, drinking a lot of liquid, eating a lot of junk food, right? And they're hearing all this scary stuff. And then at the very end, somebody will say, "Now I got you." But they did it at a perfect timing. And when they did that, you look it down and, oh my God, I pissed myself. And you got like 50 people all around you and you realize, oh my God. But then you realize all 50 people did the same thing. So it wasn't so bad.
Yeah, pretty much. It was just a urine fest. But those jump scares, they could timed properly. Very, very effective.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I still remember some of those camp stories. I just love them. I really do. When we were in Vietnam, we would do the same thing. We would sit there, at night, and we would tell horrible, scary stories, and then, just to kill the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember working at a lodge in Northern Ontario, and a good friend of mine, JP, used to just love delighting in telling me scary stories, making up these ghost stories. We were in, bunk beds trying to go to bed, and I'm on the top bunk, he's on the bottom bunk, and he starts sharing scary stories. Then he would just fall asleep, and I would lie there, just every creak, every noise in the night, jumping that, and I couldn't. I'd maybe get a couple hours sleep, and then we'd have to get to work in the morning. But there's just something fascinating, and that's complete. Just a story, just oral storytelling, no visuals or anything like that. Again, like a really good radio program.
Well, see, that's the thing. I grew up, when I was a kid, we didn't even, when I, my youngest age, I can remember, we didn't even have a TV. And then when we got our first TV, it was a Crosley TV. Most people won't even know who Crosley was. But I remember it had like about a 5-inch round circle as a screen. And then, it was black and white and big, huge cabinet. All the relatives would come over every Friday, Saturday, and just watch TV. And I kept going, oh my God, no privacy. But, it was so unique, because it was to watch TV. But, I even remember back before that, when we had the radio in the front room before the TV, the relatives would come in and we'd be listening to these shows. Could you imagine War of the Worlds and those type of shows that were put on? There were so many of those shows put on from the 30s, 40s, 50s. And they, the thing is, but it's like when you got a good book, right? You get into it. What is bad is now the young kids, they turn on the TV and they watch a TV show and they really don't think. So if you ask them what happened 10 minutes ago, I don't know. But when you were a kid and you had to listen to these radio shows, you actually closed your eyes and you imaginated, Chris, each little thing that was going on. So if you heard the creak, you had your eyes closed. You could actually see that monster or that bad person, making that foot, making that creak noise when they put their foot down. You thought that out and it was there in your brain and you had to think.
Oh yeah, that was powerful. I never had the pleasure of experiencing that, properly, the way that you did, but I do remember an album I had when I was younger, and it had The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and then Rip Van Winkle on the other side. And I'll never forget sitting there in the pseudo dark with a friend of mine, listening to the album, listening to the voice, the narration, and just being chilled. And that's probably as close as I had experienced to that. And we would just put it on over and over again, right? Because it was only those two stories. Rip Van Winkle was more like a science fiction-y tale, but The Legend of Sleeping Hollow, I mean, still, I still have that album. I still have that vinyl record, just because, when I hold it, I'm brought back to that really magical experience that you were just describing.
Oh, yeah. And again, War of the Worlds, a lot of people still don't realize when that first aired, there was Amos and Andy was on the competition on a different radio network. And a lot of people were tuned into that because it was a big show. Then Orson Welles would come on. I think it was on CBS. I could be wrong. And they would tune into it, but they didn't tune into the beginning of the show, or a lot of people didn't because they were listening to Amos and Andy.
Right.
And then they tuned into, War of the Worlds, where he was saying, this is a radio play. This is not real. And, the little disclaimer, right? And then they heard about the Martians invading the cities, and people all across the country were freaking out because they thought these aliens were real and they were killing people. And that's what radio could do at one time. That's how strong it was. Powerful.
Yeah, I did actually, this turned into a novel later on, but prior to selling the rights to a publisher, I did a blog, serialized blog story, but back when blogging was new.
Oh yeah.
Initially, I think in 2006 or so, and it was a story. It was complete fiction from the point of view of a teenager who thought he had a death curse because everyone around him was dying. So it was written like a blog, a diary online. And my plan was to roll it out. It rolled out over 9 months. Now, I had disclaimers all over the blog because I remembered that. I didn't want people to think this was because he's a suicidal teenager with all these people that are dying around him. And I would have strangers discover it, not notice that, and try to talk to Peter, my main character. And so I incorporated Peter into answering them, but then I would also message them and say, Peter's not real. This is fiction. And then they would fall into it and go, oh, it's cool. And they were enjoying it, and they stayed for the ride. And that was fascinating because over the 9 months that I was rolling out this story online, that's usually how people discovered it. They thought it was real. They thought Peter was real. They wanted to connect with him. They wanted to help him. And God bless people for seeing somebody hurting like that was fictional, reaching out to him, and then, finding out he was fictional, but still sticking around for the story. And that was, for myself as a writer, that writing came as close to standing around a campfire and sharing stories with people. Because when you tell a story, you embellish a lot, and depending on the reactions of the people and that are there, and you can see their faces, and you can kind of play with a little bit of improv there. I got to do that with this story online because depending on the comments that people were leaving, I was able to incorporate things into the story and give them a little bit more about what they were enjoying. And that was a really unique experience. Again, there was no panic. There was no panic thinking that the world was was being invaded by aliens. But that was a really fascinating, horror writing experience for me.
Well, again, you did it at the time when internet was really new, because before that, there was nothing more but bulletin boards where you could post something up, short. And then the blogging came in the early, 2000s and stuff like that, where, the internet was advancing. But you could actually take that story, depending on how your audience, your readers were, taking it and their input back to you, then you can go, well, I can change it. That is what when you write a book and you take it to the publisher, there it is. But in a case like that, where you get feedback from all these people, you can just take that story any which way you want to go.
And it was amazing. So I had a character who I fell in love with. He was meant to be a supply teacher who comes in and teaches this kid, and the kid kind of likes the teacher, and then of course the teacher's going to die. And I ended up really liking the teacher, and so did a lot of my readers. They really liked the interaction because this teacher was, let's be honest, I mean, I was basing him on my favorite teacher I ever had, through high school and university, and John Keating, the character that Robin Williams played in Dead Poets Society, and that character was based on all of those elements. And I got to a point where he just extended and he lived a lot longer. But I knew it was a plot device I was working on. He had to die for something else to happen. So I had to break the fourth wall, and I posted a comment that said, "Hey, this is Mark, the writer here. I need your help, dear readers, the people who are following along. Robbie's going to die, but I need you to help me decide, should he die a hero or a villain? Because again, I kind of like in a mystery, you can kind of pepper it either way. I had enough clues either way. And they decided whether he was going to die as a hero or a villain. And like you said, it's so cool that as I was writing the story, they were helping me decide things along the way.
That makes it fun and more unique. Again, have you ever done any scripts for any TV shows and stuff? Because on this show, we've had like Mark Cushman, we've had whole bunch of different authors, who wrote, for things like Star Trek, Murder, She Wrote, you name it. We've had a lot of different, authors and actors on their show. And, that's why when I found about you, I like this type of stuff. I like scary stuff. And, nowadays, I'll be honest with you, scariness has gotten warped. I was watching The Cabin last night, where these students go, and it's basically some government agency is, basically sacrificing young people. And I watched that and I go, this really sucked. It was scary, but it was a different type of scariness. I like the type where you get led into it, and then you get the big whammo.
Yeah, with the atmospheric one, there was the movie. I'm still remembering like one of the better horror films that I remember from the last, I don't know, 10 years or so. Because again, I'm not a big fan of a lot of them, unfortunately. I think it was Nicole Kidman, and she was in a house and there were ghosts there. And at the end of the movie, you found out that she and her family were the ghosts. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember what I think it was based on a classic novel too.
Yeah. What was it, JC?
The Other.
The Other?
Yeah, The Others.
Yeah, The Others. Interesting. Well, do you have any scary stories you can share with the listeners? Because they're really freaking out right now. They want to be scared.
Yeah, sure. I guess I can. I was talking about Haunted Hamilton, and I'm going to share a story. And this is one of the stories. Is one of the first times working on a book like this really chilled me to the bone. And this was a story that I found and a lot of the stories I find in old newspapers and archives and things like that. And this was a story, so I call it the Tombstone Ghost. And a man and woman are living in a small, 4-story apartment building on the Hamilton Mountain. And he wakes up in the middle of the night. His wife is screaming her head off. And he turns, and she's laying there on her back, looking up at the ceiling. Her eyes are wide open, and she's just white as a ghost, screaming. And he says, "What? What happened?" And she said, I was laying here. I opened my eyes. I looked above me, and about a foot over, above her, floating there, was this old woman, like hag with the dark, sunken eyes. And it was just the top half of her body. It was just floating there. And she looked like she was screaming, but I couldn't hear anything. And then when I screamed, she disappeared off into this one corner of the bedroom, this one particular corner between the window and the closet. And it kept happening. Every few nights, she would wake up around the same time, see the woman hovering over her bed with a silent scream. She would scream, the woman would disappear into that same spot in the wall. And this was in the newspaper. They actually brought in a priest, exorcist. They brought in paranormal investigators. They even brought them in from the U.S. because Hamilton's only about an hour away from New York State. Crossing that Niagara Falls, and they discovered that yes, there was a spirit in the house. It was a woman. They believed the woman had died in the house, and they couldn't figure out much about the woman except that they knew that she had been in a wheelchair for her last years. And that's why they thought, oh, that's why I'm only seeing the top half of her body. They couldn't figure out what was going on. The couple eventually moved out of the apartment because it wasn't stopping. And then 10 years later, there's an article in the newspaper of the man who was in the original story holding a piece of broken tombstone, standing on the spot where the building they lived in used to stand. They were doing construction. They were taking the building down to put up another building there on the site. And in the wall of the building, which was the same side where the ghost was disappearing, was a piece of tombstone with the names of children who had died, and they connected it back to somebody who had lived in that building, the woman with the broken legs, and the children that had died there. And it almost felt they believed that she was trying to let them know that there's a tombstone in the wall of the building. And so that was this really fascinating tale that took place over the course of 10, 12 years. And they still, it was still a bit of a mystery, but it was still one of the ones that was really fascinating. So as I am sitting in my basement office and my wife and my son were asleep upstairs, I was working full time. So I was writing this book, at night. After dinner, I'd go and I'd work for hours and hours and hours, and then go to bed, sleep a few hours, get up, go to work the next day. And so I'm sitting in my office with the newspaper article with the artist rendition of the screaming woman hovering over the bed. Then the spooky ghost. I can still picturing it now. I'm getting chills. And there was the only lights in the house. Everyone's asleep upstairs, and there's 2 floors up. And I remember finishing work and going, oh no, now I'm going to have to turn off the lights and go walk up all the way through the dark and go to bed. And I actually sat there for 45 minutes in the light of my office because I was too scared to leave, to go, into the dark and upstairs. I actually sat there in my chair thinking, I could just sleep in this chair, right? I mean, give it a shot. And I was like, no, I can't sleep here in my chair with the lights on. I'm going to have to make it. But it was that first time that doing the research and writing the story, I just finished the chapter and, everything was good to go. And I'd scared myself so much I couldn't go to bed.
Well,
and that was a fun moment.
Again, JC is a noted, believe it or not, he's into the paranormal ghost hunter. And he's been on a couple of documentaries and stuff like that. I didn't know if you knew that. And he has said some things, honestly, Mark, that would scare the you-know-what out of you that he's encountered.
Wow.
And that's the whole point. There is things out there that, do they really exist or don't they?
Yeah.
Are we living in a artificial intelligence society that maybe we're running on a computer program?
Yeah.
Or are we in reality? I don't know, but it's some strange things that go on. Seriously.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and I love capturing that, and I love asking the questions. I particularly love the stories where things seem to make sense. This is what's possible, but we never really have the answer. And the questions, I think, are what are fascinating, and the way that our imagination fills in those gaps is also that fascinating element there.
Well, there's so much things, like people sitting on their couch, right? And they burst into flames and they can't figure out how that happened. Then you got things, like Bigfoot, you dogmen, you got all these different cryptic things out there. You got poltergeists, you got ghosts. You have all this stuff here, and yet, we can't really prove that any of this really exists. But,
No.
but this stuff goes back so many years and all around the world. I mean, it has to be truth because it goes back before there was newspapers, certainly before the internet.
Oh, for sure. I mean, every culture has stories like this, has legends, has trying to explain the inexplainable. Like we can't explain this. And again, that is, I think, that's part of the fascination. Yeah, I mean, the tons of ghost story books that I have, because I can't walk into a bookstore, used bookstore, new bookstore. I can't walk in without going to the paranormal section and seeing what books I'm gonna pull down for research, and a lot of them are historical in different cultures, and the way that they the way that they share these kinds of legends is it's just like you said, so consistent across time.
Well, again, doing research, going in and buying an old book. I don't know how old you're talking about, but, you can find stuff that's like 80, 90, 100 and plus years old, and you can read it and get just really terrified. But how do you know when you grab that book, when you bring it home and start reading it, JC, couldn't he bring an attachment or something home to him where his encounter of a ghostly thing could be real?
Oh, yeah. Let me just say, I bought some books a long time ago. They were witches books, real witches books. They had spells in them and all there was stuff in there you couldn't unsee, of tortures. Anyway, there was 5 of them. They were 150, 200 years old. Bought them over on the East Coast, not far from Salem, actually. But anyway, these books had attachments, and I had to lock them up hermetically sealed in a safe, and salt water, sealed up and everything, or with salt. And it was still, the attachments were so noisy around my house. And then I had them for about 2 years. I had to find the right buyer for them, because those, if they went in the wrong hands, it would be bad. But I started to settle down and get married and stuff. And I was like, hey, my future wife was like, you got to get rid of these books. They're causing a lot of havoc, so to speak. But yes, books can, and any object can have attachment to it. Most definitely.
Well, Mark, have you ever got a book in one of those old bookstores or wherever you find them and bring it home and start reading it, and then you have nightmares at night, or weird things happen in your house? And
not yet, and I still take the risk. I actually wrote about. I found in my research a story very similar to what JC was just sharing from a used bookstore from Barrie, Ontario, here in the province where I live in Canada, and this was in my book Tomes of Terror. And it was a gentleman who had bought a history book that he really liked, and he put it on the nightstand right beside his bed. And in the middle of the night, he kept seeing this old man in military garb, who was looked like he was standing near the closet, and they thought it had something to do with the closet. And they did bring a priest in, who actually said, no, it's the book. It's attached to the book. And so he recommended just taking the book back to the bookstore, just reselling it to the used bookstore, and the ghost disappeared from that point on.
He was lucky, because sometimes you can take the book back and that attachment's with you now, or your house, or your
it's
family.
Like, no, I like this place. I'm sticking around.
Yeah. Well, hey, Mark, we need to take about a 4-minute break. When we come back, if you have any more ghost stories you can share to the audience. It's not Friday, but I got everybody, psyched up to put their feet up, by the fireplace, put a log in there, drink a couple martinis, and lay back, and let's get some people scared.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, we'll be right back with Mark. And by the way, check out his books and all that. So we'll be right back. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio.
When the going gets weird, Alexander Strange gets going. He's America's only full-time weird news reporter. You can follow his adventures in a series of mysteries by award-winning journalist and author J.C. Bruce. Kirkus Reviews calls the Strange Files series suspenseful page-turners, punctuated with dashes of the surreal. The online book club says they're full of twists and turns, simultaneously mystery and comedy. Available in hardcover, paperback, and ebooks. Order your copies online at Amazon and Barnes & Noble right now. Just search for J.C. Bruce and look for The Strange Files, Florida Man, Get Strange, Strange Currents, and Mr. Manners. See why the critics are raving about this series. Order your copies right now. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
Hi, this is Val Von Torn of Metatron Power and Light. You're listening to Gary Anderson and Night Dreams Talk Radio.
We're back here with Mark. How long have you been writing these scary stories and stuff?
Well, my whole life I've been writing scary stories. So let's say, oh my God, I can't do the math. I cannot do the math from 53 to 15. Let me take my shoes and socks off here to try and figure this out.
Okay, I have to do that quite often, actually, at least do my balance sheets. You know, again, when you were a young kid and you were writing these scary stories, how did your parents take it?
You know what was really funny is my mom was an avid reader. She read probably 3 romance novels a day, Harlequin novels, just piles and piles of novels, and she would always say, "Mark, why can't you write a nice story?" And it was kind of funny. So I grew up in mid-northern Ontario, and so it was like a small town in the middle of the woods, just near Sudbury, Ontario, north of there. My dad was a hunter and fisher, and I used to jokingly say the reason I write horror is so in the fall, my dad would go moose hunting because that was moose hunting season. And when you captured a moose, you would bring them back, and you would. We actually had racks in our garage, and you wouldn't be able to park the vehicles in there while moose hunting season. You'd leave them outside in the yard, and there was these racks. You would hang the moose or the deer, and you would skin them and let them bleed out for a few days, and then you would bring them to the local butcher, who would turn them into steaks and stuff like that. And I remember the one time, after dark, going on my bicycle and going to put my bike away because I got to get in the house, and forgetting that there were dead moose hanging in the garage. And so I remember walking into the garage, the smell of death, just the smell of blood, just pervasive in the whole garage. And then looking over, seeing something hanging that seemed to be moving in the dark, and then the eyes looking at me. And then remembering, oh yeah, there's moose there. But I used to jokingly tell them, I'm like, well, of course I'm going to write horror stories. Did you see what kind of childhood I had?
Did it scare you when you go in that, forget and go into it and you see all these, dead moose, deer hanging?
I mean, I remember, forgetting, because, you're playing with your friends and you whatever, and I get on my bike and I go back in, and as I'm there by myself, putting the bike in this proper spot, smelling that and looking over, seeing the shadow, and then seeing the reflection on the eyes and the glow. And it was like, oh boy. Oh, okay. For a second, I had no idea what this was. And then I realized, oh yeah, it's the moose. So, that happened to me. It only happened once, but it still sticks with me.
I'll be honest with you. I wasn't, a hunter. My dad wasn't a hunter. He was a backpacker. But I remember one time he took me to make me a man. I think I was like 8 years old, down to the lake, and made me fish. I didn't want to fish, but I caught a fish and I was excited. I got a fish, Dad. And then we took the fish over to the picnic table and he said, okay, I want you to cut the head off. And I tell you, I broke down crying. It was so horrible, because I saw this living creature, and here I'm sitting there cutting, my dad's making me cut his head off. And then, people go out and, go out deer hunting and, bear hunting and stuff like that. And I don't know. At least I didn't have a dream that night of the fish coming and getting me.
I couldn't, I couldn't gut or fillet a fish. My dad was good at that. I loved eating the stuff. I didn't like the process of how it happened. But I remember taking my son out. I think he was 8 years old. And I chartered a boat to go take him fishing because I wanted him to have that experience because my dad was no longer with us. And I wasn't all that good at it. So I wanted him to have that. And I remember he was so excited because he caught his fish. And then right on this boat, it was like a larger boat that you can walk around on, like the one from Jaws.
Yeah.
And then he caught the fish. And then right there on the boat, the guy just sliced the head off blood gushed out everywhere. My son turned white. And then they filleted it and everything, and then we brought them to my mom. She was very excited that our grandson caught her some fish. But I remember later that we're going to bed that night, and he's in his bed and I'm in mine. And he's like, "Dad, there was a lot of blood." And I remember going, "Oh my God, I did it to my son now."
Yeah, did he eat any of the fish?
Oh, he loved it. I mean, he'd been grown up eating fish. And so it was just really, it was a proud moment when my mom cooked it up, and it was kind of like, that's the fish he caught. And I remember having that proud moment too. Yeah, I could catch the fish. I just couldn't deal with anything until it was time to eat it.
How do these people come up with, remember Hotel Hell, that movie?
No.
Oh, you don't, JC, Motel Hell. Do you remember that one? We can't hear you. You're not coming in, JC, at all.
I'm sorry, I'm here. I had a call from a guest, actually.
Well, which is more important, the guest or the show?
Well, I don't know the show, but anyway.
The show, okay. Yeah, Motel Hell. Do you remember that one? You seem to always know everything.
Oh my goodness, I seen that movie in 1981 at the drive-in. Rory Calhoun was in it. Yes, Motel Hell.
Isn't that where they took people, right? And then they'd find people, and then they would plant them in the garden and grow them, and they were making sausages, and they had the best sausages in the county.
Oh my goodness! The scariest part, they had them in the garden, but they had burlap bags over their head, Gary, and they were making these noises like you didn't know what it was.
Well, they cut out their vocal cords.
Yeah, they were going, and the bags were moving, right? And I was like, what is that? And they pulled the bags off, and there was these people. It freaked me out.
Yeah, and then harvest time, they would take their tractor, right? And they'd have all these weird lights and space sounds and stuff, and they would tell all the people that were planted they're going on a space trip, and then they put a rope around their neck and, harvest them and then make sausages.
Oh, my God, that show was so freaky when I first seen it. Yeah.
Hey, don't ever take a girlfriend to a drive-in movie and think you're going to score if you go see like Hotel Hell. It's not going to happen.
Oh, no, that's definitely not the movie to see. I still have flashbacks from that one.
I do too. I just watched it the other night. That's why it came up. But Mark, did scary movies like that have a major input of your writing too?
I think so. Scary movies were definitely. I mean, every single thing that I consume, whether it's stories around a campfire, whether it's scary movies, and I'll never forget the Changeling. The scene in the Changeling where the ball comes down the stairs,
right?
And then there's George C. Scott keeps going up, and there's that door that's closed, the attic door. It was one of those times when I should not have been watching, because my parents had the TV on. I get up and to say I have to go to the washroom, and then I'd sneak around and take a peek at the TV, and I caught moments like that of the movie. And I remember, I guess I don't know why they let me watch The Exorcist and The Omen.
They let you watch though. How old are you? And they let you watch them?
I don't know. Maybe I was only 10 or 12, or it was just one of the things where I just kind of I couldn't sleep or whatever. I made some excuse. I'm like, oh, can I just sit up with you guys? And it was stupidly a show like that was on, and scenes from those movies still chill me to this day. And so those would be the formative movies that I remember seeing, or just catching, if it was only 15 minutes here or 20 minutes there, and just having them stick with me in such a powerful way. And I think there was something about those movies.
Yeah. Are you still there? I think we lost. Okay. We lost you there for a minute.
Poltergeist was one of the ones I remember seeing in the movie theater. I think I was old enough to get into it, and that terrified me. I watched it again recently, and it wasn't as scary, although there are still moments. The clown under the bed, the tree, the shadow of the tree. Those really get me.
Well, again, going back at that time frame when it came out, it was really scary. I know we had a VHS of it. and my oldest daughter at the time was infatuated with it. That and Titanic, boy, those two movies. And I finally got mad, and I end up cutting the tape, and then when she put it in, it broke. She would come home on the weekends, she would watch it nonstop from the minute she got up to the minute she went to bed. And then when she came home from school, guess what it was? The same thing. And I, how many times could you see the original Poltergeist? I mean, it was to the point. It was like, oh my God. But I mean, that's how far some people can get into these things. And now you've had all this rich stuff. I mean, when you sit down there and you decide, I'm going to write a scary book, how do you come up with the idea of a book? I mean, how do you just come up with the subject and the idea?
Well, for true ghost stories, I usually start with a theme. So the theme would be, a city. So I've done Hamilton, I've done Ottawa, I've done Sudbury. These are cities I've lived in, so I had a connection to. Tomes of Terror I specifically was looking for haunted bookstores and libraries, and haunted hospitals should be obvious what the subject matter was. When it comes to fiction, you usually take one element. So, for example, I have a fiction series called Canadian Werewolf. And the first book in the series is called A Canadian Werewolf in New York. And the premise was just, I thought, what would it be like if you lived in New York City and you had lycanthropy? So, full moon, you'd turn into an actual wolf, not a half man, half wolf. You'd turn into a wolf for 10, 12 days every month. Then you'd wake up in the middle of a major city naked with no memory or knowledge of what happened the night before. What would you do? How would you find clothes? How would you get home? All of that. And so it was meant to be a dark humor answering the question of how would this guy live like that? And that became a series called my Canadian Werewolf series, where I just continued to explore this. I call them a beta male, a beta human, and an alpha wolf. And he has superpowers as a human because he has enhanced senses and stuff like that. But the whole premise, the whole series, and book 6 is coming out in March of this year. But the whole premise came down to this one thing, just imagining, and I was in New York at the time, I was visiting there, and I was walking by Battery Park, and I was just imagining, right there in that set of bushes, waking up there naked, and a bullet hole in your leg and the taste of human blood in your mouth, wondering what the hell you did the night before and how am I going to get home. Like this. And that's sometimes a whole novel or a whole series can come out of just that one thought.
Do you believe that these creatures could be existing? Because, a lot of people are claiming they see dogmen, which kind of look like a werewolf.
Potentially. I think because we will often make up excuses for things that make sense. We will apply, and even in the series of the book, we have a witch coven, older woman explained to her daughter, "Oh yeah, when mundanes see this, they just assume that, or they're not actually seeing the magic happening. They thought you were throwing rocks, even though she was throwing like lightning bolts or whatever, because they can't understand it. Therefore, they apply what they know to it." And I wonder if we do the same thing, that there are things that we just come up with a mundane explanation for it, because otherwise, we might go crazy thinking about it, right?
Well, things like werewolf, for example, if you go back and trace it, how far have you been able to trace back the folklore of werewolf? Doesn't it go back, centuries? Yeah,
centuries. It goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. Yeah. And again, werewolf is like there's werewolf stories common in so many different cultures throughout Europe, which is fascinating. Of course, I've done a lot of research on historical werewolves because I had to make up my own version of it, but I wanted to understand the legends and where they came from. I mean, there's even a whole bunch of stuff around World War II where there was the belief that the Nazi army had werewolf soldiers and super soldiers and stuff like that. I mean, I read this really thick academic text, is about 800 pages, called Hitler's Monsters, which is really about the exploration that Hitler and some of his people did into the occult, and experimenting, because trying to use the occult to try and win World War II. And there's some werewolf lore there that you can read articles about the fear that soldiers had that the werewolves were going to get them.
Well, if you really think about it, even Hitler, they traveled the world looking for the occult, the paranormal, the strange, to get more information on it, how they could merge it into the Third Reich. And you look at folklore of, of werewolves, and then you all these people that claim they go out and they say a dogman. I think that the dogman is a new word for werewolf, at least in this country, because I think that what it is I think these things do exist. I really do. So you're writing on something that could possibly be your neighbor.
You never know.
Down the street.
You never know. That is.
Don't go there late at night and borrow a cup of sugar. Don't do that.
No. I mean, as Hamlet said, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophies, right?
How's your wife take you about writing scary, ghostly, type of?
She really enjoys that. She's a non-believer. I'm a believer, and I'm scared of the dark. She's brave and strong, and is a non-believer. But she loves going on ghost walks. She loves doing the exploration, because she's really wanting to see something so that she can prove that it's real. And so she's boldly in there having a blast. And she humors me a lot. Like, hey, when we're on this trip, can we go? We had to drive to Orlando. I was there for a writing conference, and we decided to drive from Ontario, Canada, to there. And we took several days, and we mapped out a plan so we could visit a whole bunch of different haunted spots. That is some of which I had researched. And so, no, she's really very supportive, and obviously I talk a lot, at the dinner table about stuff that I'm working on. So she's a great person to bounce off some ideas.
Wow. And you say you're scared of the dark. Are you just saying it, or are you actually scared and terrified of the night?
I am. Yeah, I'm scared of the dark. I had to go down. I'm trying to lose weight. It's January. I'm trying to turn a new leaf at the beginning of the year. I went down into the basement to get on the treadmill and just watch a YouTube channel. And I think I watched, before I went down, I ended up watching a trailer for a horror movie, Skinamarink, and it's coming out this year. And the trailer is only a minute and 50 seconds, and it is so terrifying, just the sound and the visuals, that I'm down there in the basement. She's just upstairs, so she could protect me. But I'm scared.
Oh, come on! I'm going to be honest. I already come to the conclusion. I've been married over 45 years. I'm going to be honest with you. One of those nights, when I drop the phone and it goes under the bed, when she goes down there and gets it for me, if there is like a shadow man or some creature underneath that bed, she's going to be the first one out of that room. She's going to be the first one in her car driving off. She's not going to think about me being torn apart.
Well, Liz is a little bit different. She's the one that would fight it. I would be the one screaming like Ned Flanders and running out of the room.
Well, you're my type of man. You know that. I don't know. This again, a lot of, like I said, James makes fun of me all the time. I'll be honest with you. When I was a young kid, I got farmed out a lot. We lived in Seattle, and my dad's brother and grandmother lived in Oakland, California. And I would be farmed out for about a month during the summer, if I didn't get sent to camp, I would be, 2 weeks with my grandmother, 2 weeks with my uncle and his family. And the first time I was at my grandmother's place, she was in an old apartment in Oakland. And it was like an 1870s apartment, that old, maybe even older.
Right.
And I remember the bedroom door had, the real classic crystal glass doors and all that stuff. And in a big bedroom, but the bed kind of like, you open up this door and it was a walk-in closet. The bed would fold down to the floor. I remember that much. And then there was a little dim light in the closet. And she said, okay, well, you can sleep in here. And I got in there and I tried to go to sleep. And I remember the shadow came out of the closet and it went around the entire wall, every wall in that bedroom. And then it went back in the closet.
No.
Oh, yeah. I remember the next morning, I was hysterical. I called up my parents. I want to go uncle's. I don't want to be here. I can't be here. And, my grandmother fessed up years later. She said that apartment was haunted. I don't know, but that's the only scary thing I can remember as a child. But, can you imagine you're a young kid and you see a figure come out of the closet and walk around, slide around the walls, and it's a shadow of a human?
No. I've got chills like you wouldn't believe. Rubbing my arms straight.
That's why that's why when I go to bed at night, I make sure if any weird noises that blanket is over my head. Like hell, it's going to protect me, but I am still, to this day, I'm 71, and I get terrified at night when I hear strange noises or creaks and going down the hallway when I know there's nobody going down the hallway.
Something magical about those covers too. They'll protect you.
Yeah. Now, do you have a website or anything?
Yeah, my website is markleslie.ca.
Okay, and do you have a Facebook you can share to the listeners?
Mark Leslie Author is on Facebook. And basically, if you go to my website, markleslie.ca, you'll find links to all my social media, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all the places. YouTube, I used to do Free Friday Frights, where I would share either from a chapter of one of the books I'd researched about nonfiction or a fiction story. So I did that probably for about 9 months. And just that was sort of a 15-minute sort of either reading or chat about one of the stories I'd researched.
Interesting. Now, where are your books available?
My books are available pretty much everywhere, in print, in ebook, and about 3/4 of them are available in audiobook as well. You can get them from the libraries, find them on places like Amazon. If you go to books2read.com, that's books, the numeral 2read.com/Mark Leslie, you find a listing for all of my fiction and nonfiction books, and the links to all the retailers are from there as well.
And what's your latest couple books you have out?
Latest couple books was actually Lover's Moon, which was the 5th book in my Canadian Werewolf series. I co-authored that with Julie Strauss. And interestingly enough, the very latest book that I released just around Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, and this year was The Canadian Mounted, which was a nonfiction book, not of ghosts. It was a trivia guide to planes, trains, and automobiles. And that's because that's the name of the book that John Candy's reading at the airport, the Canadian actor. And it was actually a porn novel. And I just it's been out of print, and I turned it into a trivia book about one of my favorite films for the 35th anniversary of that movie. So there's nothing scary in that book.
Yeah, I'll tell you, he was one hell of a actor, and I remember him from Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, and SCTV and all of those, like, just such a great actor, and again, that's one of my favorite roles that he played, and so that was that was sort of a fun departure for me to just write about one of my favorite films.
Okay, well, hey Mark, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and remember, if you drop your cell phone, have your wife get it.
Definitely.
Okay,
thanks so much, Gary.
Thank you for coming on the show. Well, James, who's our guest tomorrow?
Oh, boy. We have a really good guest tomorrow. It's Ann Williams, the Egyptologist, coming on, and she's going to talk about some of the most important discoveries in Egypt over the years and some other things, plus her new book. So it's going to be exciting. She's very well trained archaeologist and a writer.
Yeah, they found some interesting things here again in the news today or yesterday. They found another, in one of the tombs, they found paintings that go back 4,400 years that are just like new. I mean, no anything, no oxidization or anything. And then, about a week ago, they found like 80 some mummies in the old, in the Great Pyramid, in another tunnel they didn't know existed. And they keep finding stuff like this. It's so interesting. So that's going to be a good show. But what really scares me? Seriously. I don't know the paranormal, how much of it is real, how much of it is made up, and folklore and stuff like that. But things like, if you really think about it, JC, think about werewolves. Why was it going back in, centuries ago? that they were people that would turn into these creatures. And you think about it, then, here, the last 20 years, people are talking about dogmen and, they resemble a dog. Well, what does a dog resemble? A wolf. And then you think about the, werewolves.
Yeah, these lycanthropes, werewolves, I know they're traced back to at least the 16 or 1700s. Matter of fact, there was a case in France where a guy supposedly turned into a werewolf, killed, 20, 30 people. Germany, it traces all the way back. And then when they moved over here, down to the French in Louisiana, they got the Rougarous and folklore all throughout.
Oh, yeah. Now, Kim out there in chat, I will say this. There's movies I remember, scary movies. You go to bed at night with this beautiful woman and you're making mad, passionate love, and then you find out halfway through it, just before you come, that, you know what? She was a demon. She, it was the scariest thing you could ever imagine. Think about that.
Succubus.
Yeah, I'm not going to suck your bus, but, if you think about these things, I mean, some of the things, could you imagine, could they exist? Just like zombies and stuff like that. Do they exist? There was a guy in the news last week that got arrested. He was caught in an alley eating a guy's face off of his skull.
Oh, yeah. There was that one designer drug that made people into zombies, that Flacca. People were going crazy on that in Florida for a while.
Yeah, could you imagine, though? This was a week ago. Could you imagine, someday that maybe some type of drug gets put out and it could have an effect to make, zombies? They're the Walking Dead, but they're, where it kills certain parts of their brain and they become, why would even with a drug, why would that induce somebody to start eating somebody's face off?
Yeah, it turns them psychosis in their brain, makes them think they go out of their mind. Face eaters or brain eaters or whatever, but it's scary. And they have superhuman strength. I've seen the videos.
I know. Hey, Kim. Well, I've spit my tea out before and it went over the monitors. I'm not even going to ask you where your tea went, but I like it. You're a tea drinker. That's what I'm drinking myself right now. Good old Lipton tea. And, that's just it. A lot of these things, maybe do exist. I mean, could you imagine, though, that you marry a woman, you really don't know her, and then you find out she's a witch? I know what it's like. My first wife was one, and I'll tell you, she was a practicing witch. And I tell you, I came home to some scary, what?
Yeah, I know that story. That is scary. That's a heck of a time to find out the secret side of your wife.
Well, you find out things that you just can't explain. Because I remember before I called it quits with our marriage, we bought a new house, at least new to us. And we moved in, and we were in there for maybe about a month, and we went somewhere for a couple hours. And when we came back home, the whole house was full of adult, huge, dead flies, and they were dropping dead as we were walking around. I'm talking where it was just like thousands of these big, huge horse flies. And I got an exterminator out, and he's looking at these, and he's saying, how could you be living in this place? They had been in here for months. And I go, no, we had not a single fly. We lived in here at least a month. There was no flies in this house. We took off for a couple hours. We came back and it was full of flies. And then my lovely wife said, okay, have you learned your lesson from me?
Oh my goodness. That's scary right there. When she actually said that to you.
Oh yeah. And that was the end of the marriage. Seriously.
Boy, you wouldn't want to make her mad. You're going to wake up, turn into a toad. You'll be craving eating those
But
flies.
again, the exterminator said there was no way these flies could have been living in the house. Not in the rooms or anywhere. I'm talking, if you opened your mouth, you would have had a mouthful of flies. I've never seen that many flies in my life.
Yeah, that's a red flag. That's an infestation of something very negative when your house is overrun by flies. Especially, wasn't it in the fall or wintertime too?
It was. It wasn't even in the summertime. And they were horse flies. They were huge. And I'm not joking. They were dying. And as they were flying, they were dropping down on the floor. I mean, they were, you couldn't even take a step without gushing them.
Oh,
That's how many it was. I mean, it freaked me out.
yeah, that would get your attention. That's a big red flag. I'll tell you what, you'd been in trouble. You made her real mad.
That or somebody got a whole truck full, a semi truck full in the, the back end, filled it with a whole bunch of flies, backed up to our front door and opened up the doors and let them in. I don't know any way that it could have happened, but I tell you, there's strangeness out there. It's scary stuff. And I tell you what, when you go to bed at night, if you hear a strange noise, don't get up to investigate it because you never know what could happen. Send your wife to do it.
Yes, and get one of those magic blankies like you got that's a force field against monsters and ghosts.
Yeah, tomorrow, again, we got Ann R. Williams. We're going to be talking about treasures of Egypt. So it's going to be a great show. We got a lot of great guests. Who do we have next week?
Yeah, matter of fact, Sunday we got Rob Shelsky coming on. He's going to be talking about, UFOs and UAPs and disclosure and everything that's going on in the state of that ufology. And then we've got, matter of fact, coming up on Wednesday, we have Jeffrey Bruce coming on talking about asteroids and some of the dangers and can we do anything to protect ourselves. And then on Thursday, we have Stan Gordon coming back. Now, Stan is very well known. He gets all kind of reports since the 1960s from UFOs to cryptids, flying, Bigfoot, you name it. And then on Friday, we have Dr. Don Lincoln coming on talking about black holes and solar flares.
Okay. You almost laughed, didn't you?
Oh, I had to bite my lip.
Okay. Well, till tomorrow, everybody have a good one. Stay out of trouble. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. And I want to thank each one of you for tuning into the show tonight. Make sure you tell your friends about our show. And again, disclosure today came out in the news. And basically, if anybody's going to be talking on their show tonight about all this great disclosure came out, well, all I can say is hockey puck, because nothing came out. The government said, again, the Pentagon said that, yeah, there's about 121 cases or whatever. We don't know what it is. That's all they could say. Everything else, they said, hey, it's, maybe from another country, maybe this. We just don't know what it is. They didn't say anything like it's off-world, no nothing. So if you expect that, I'll tell you what, I'll sell you a slow boat to China for just $1. Catch you tomorrow. Everybody have a good one. Stay out of trouble.